Food is very important because it's part of our daily life.
Food is culture, food is life.
It's part of who we are.
You remember the moments that you share over food.
It's magic.
This is what binds people together.
What we eat really shapes our world.
When we think about the environment and climate change and things like that, we usually think about smokestacks and tailpipes and burning fossil fuels, and that's fair. But it turns out agriculture and our food system are actually one of the biggest things we've ever done to the planet. And it's only number 2 to fossil fuels when it comes to climate change.
Every day, we make hundreds of decisions about food. What should I eat for dinner? Will it taste good? Is it healthy? But we also need to ask, what's it doing to the planet? I'm Manoush Zomorodi, a longtime journalist, a TED speaker, and a mom. I care about the planet. I'm well informed. But I didn't know until recently that as much as a third of emissions that are warming the globe come from food. A third. The way we grow, process, package, transport all we eat and throw away is a problem for the climate. But changing what we eat can go a long way. Food can also be a solution. On this show, we are talking to chefs, climate experts, and scientists, all kinds of people who are finding ways to help us eat sustainably and make sure it's still delicious. And to understand exactly what that means, we need to start with why things have to change.
About 10,000 years ago, humans began to farm. This agricultural revolution was a turning point in our history that enabled people to settle, build, and create. In short, agriculture enabled the existence of civilization. Today, approximately 40% of our planet is farmland. In the future, how can we feed every member of a growing population a healthy diet? Meeting this goal will require nothing short of a second agricultural revolution. The first agricultural revolution was characterized by expansion and exploitation, feeding people at the expense of forests, wildlife, and water, and destabilizing the climate in the process. That's not an option the next time around. Agriculture depends on a stable climate, with predictable seasons and weather patterns. This means we can't keep expanding our agricultural lands because doing so will undermine the environmental conditions that make agriculture possible in the first place. We can feed humanity within the environmental limits of the Earth, but there's a very small margin of error.
So we know food contributes a lot to climate change, but a third of all emissions? How did we get to such a huge number? Jonathan Foley, an environmental scientist from Project Drawdown, breaks it down by the numbers.
This is the land that we use on Earth just to grow our crops, here in green. Here's the land we use to graze our animals, here in red. Together, that's a huge amount of land. It means that there's some massive environmental impacts just from the sheer real estate of our food system. We find that agriculture, land use, and the food system as a whole contribute about 22% of global emissions. Let's look under the hood and see what's involved in this. The first is deforestation. That's about half of all those food emissions at 11% of global emissions. To put that in perspective, the entire US economy emits 10 to 11%. Deforestation is even bigger. Second is methane from livestock. Now, we hear a lot of jokes about what cows do and all that kind of thing, but the science is actually really clear. Livestock are a huge emitter of methane, and methane's a very big driver of climate change, and we have to make that connection. Third is basically industrial farming methods, especially overusing chemicals like fertilizers and treating soil really badly. We have to think about that too. And then finally, we have rice production, another methane producer at around 2%. But that's not all. Beyond these direct emissions of food, that 22%, there are some indirect ways the food system emits greenhouse gas as well. For example, discarded food might end up in a landfill somewhere, rotting and producing methane. And then we have to think about all the energy and materials it takes to grow food, and then later to process, transport, package, and prepare it. So when we look at these data, it tells us that yes, food releases 22% of greenhouse gases directly, but when we add all the other sources, it grows to something like 34%, roughly a third of all the greenhouse gases on Earth. In other words, we cannot solve climate change unless we also address the problems of food, alongside fossil fuels and energy. We also need to look at diets. Now, this one gets a little bit tricky and people don't like to talk about it, but we're going to need to, because it turns out some foods end up emitting a lot more greenhouse gases than others. Just look at the top things on this list of greenhouse gas emissions per pound of food. What do they all have in common? They're all animal products. And then look at beef at the top of the list. It's literally off the chart. So this is kind of a big deal, and that's one of the reasons, among many, that shifting diets towards more plant-rich options is a good idea for climate.
So the way we produce food and the food we choose to eat certainly affects our climate, but it's also a two-way street. Our warming climate is already affecting our ability to grow food in more dramatic and personal ways than you might think. To learn more, I went to a very unusual dinner party with Chef Sam Kass. A decade ago, Sam was both a White House chef and senior policy advisor for healthy food initiatives. Then, in 2015, frustrated that food wasn't on the global climate agenda, he hosted a much-talked-about Last Supper featuring foods threatened by climate change. He's been hosting these dinners ever since.
Let's start with the crab cakes. In the Pacific Northwest, 2 years ago, they closed the snow crab fishery for the first time in its history. That fishery had gone from 11.7 billion crabs to 1.9 billion last year. That's over an 80% collapse of that population in just 5 years. Let's turn to fruit. Last year, we lost 95% of the Georgia peach crop. In our lifetimes, I don't believe we'll be growing peaches in Georgia at all.
There are going to be some people listening who are like, well, boo-hoo, you and your fancy friends can't have your champagne, your cava, and your crab cakes. Exactly. How do you explain the stakes to them?
Oh, well, I wish I could stop there. So let's keep going. Let's talk about wheat and rice and chickpeas.
Staples.
60% of the world's calories comes from wheat, rice, and corn. 60% from those three crops, okay? The model's on wheat. So wheat will be around for our kids. It's just going to become more expensive. For 1 degree of warming, we'll see about a 7.5% decline in yield. That's also true in rice. They go up to 40% declines of yield for rice if we start to hit the 2 degrees warming. 3.5 billion, with a B, people rely on rice for a daily part, if not the majority of their calories. It is impossible to comprehend, genuinely, the economic implications of declines of staples on that magnitude, the malnutrition and food insecurity implications of those commodities getting disrupted like that, and the political instability that that will bring.
How soon?
I mean, in some ways it's already starting to happen, but you start to get into those numbers in the next 15 years. Like, that's not that far away.
I think there's going to be some people who are like, oh my God, first you told me what I needed to eat for my brain health, for my body. Then you told me I needed to go to the farmer's market and buy organic when I can. And now what do you want me to do? What do you want them to do?
And they're right. I'm annoyed too. This is the one place in our daily lives that we can collectively have a really big impact and exercise that feeling inside of like wanting to do right by the next generation, wanting to help play a positive role in this. And how we eat gives us a shot every single day to try to do a better job. And it doesn't have to be some big overhaul. I'm not saying don't eat meat. I eat meat. Once a week, making a shift to not do a steak and to do something else, adds up to be really big numbers.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Meat. Love it or hate it, it produces more greenhouse gas than anything else humans eat. And no one likes to give up something that they love. But eating sustainably doesn't have to mean giving up on enjoying food. It does mean introducing more people to different kinds of food, which can be way more fun than you might think. Atlanta entrepreneur Pinky Cole is famous for a chain of fast food restaurants called Slutty Vegan.
Hello to all my fellow sluts in the audience.
Yes, you heard that right. At a recent event, the crowd went crazy for her because she's done the seemingly impossible, made the idea of eating vegan fun.
When you come into the doors of Slutty Vegan, the first thing that you're going to hear is, "We got a slut in the building!"
I went to check out the secret behind the slut sauce for myself.
Hi. Okay, what are we making?
Okay, so we are making the Hollywood hooker.
Okay.
And the secret to this is like you just put your mayonnaise on the side and you have to like gooey it with mayonnaise.
I mean, let's be clear. This is not like health food, right?
Technically, no.
Pinky grew up in a vegan Rastafarian household, but she's taken pains to create a brand that doesn't equate going vegan with anything remotely pious or righteous. Taste, she believes, has to come first.
It's delicious.
People love that sandwich. They go crazy over it.
This is fun food.
This is fun food. This is the brand where every single time somebody comes through the door, they want to take pictures.
Okay, the weird part is like fun, sexy,
Yes.
vegan? Like
Fun,
that's
sexy vegan, because historically, vegan has always been looked at as boring, very green, it's a salad. And I'm like, I want to debunk that myth. I want to add some razzle-dazzle to vegan food because people identify to cool.
Yeah.
And if I can make it cool, then I can teach you about the planet. Then I can teach you why it's good for you. Then I can teach you why you need to do this because this is the wave.
Is that what we need to do in other parts of dealing with climate change?
We do, because the minute people hear climate change, they like check out.
Yeah.
The average person in America is not thinking about climate change. So I think that the messaging and how we as a people navigate through this is make it relatable for people to understand. If that's what it takes to get there. If we can get to the finish line, then again, it's a win for everybody.
Do meat eaters come in here?
That's my audience.
What?
70% of my audience is the meat eater.
70%?
70%. A lot of people come up to me and say, "Hey, Pinky, if it wasn't for you, I never would even knew what vegan food was." Like, people don't even realize you eat vegan food every day. Most of your sides are vegan, right? What we do is we hold out the hand, we grab your hand, and we bring you into this community. And then you look up and you don't even realize, like, oh, I'm vegan. And oh, I love this movement.
Yeah.
And then we can begin to start having those conversations. And I feel like it is my responsibility as a vegan restaurateur in this hospitality space, in a space where it's still this, people are still trying to figure it out. It is my responsibility to be that change agent in this space.
So changing our eating habits isn't easy, but it is doable. But what about the food that gets left on our plates? Every year in the U.S. alone, nearly 40% of the millions of tons of food produced goes unsold or uneaten. We need to waste less food.
One of the most, let's say, low-hanging fruits that we have when it comes to sustainability is reducing the amount of organic waste that we're putting into the environment.
The amount of food that is wasted in Europe is equivalent to the amount of food that is produced in Africa every year.
Anaerobic decomposition of organic matter, this is without oxygen, generates methane. And so when we leave food in a landfill with no oxygen, it starts spewing this methane. 1 kilogram of organic waste is 3 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Basically, 1 kilogram of organic waste is like 1.3 liters of gasoline.
800 million people suffering physical hunger every day. It's nuts. And at the same time, wasting the food is wasting a lot of money. So it's not only morally inadequate, environmentally inadequate, financially, it's absolutely absurd.
So how do we solve that problem? That people are hungry and food that gets tossed usually ends up in a landfill where it's covered with other garbage, emitting massive amounts of planet-warming methane. Someone who understands the full scope of this problem is Jasmine Crowe-Houston.
Hunger is not an issue of scarcity. It's a logistics problem. And in the U.S. particularly, we spend $218 billion on food we never eat.
She's the founder of a company named Gunders that's redirecting uneaten food from grocery stores, restaurants, and businesses. Instead of getting tossed, Gunders workers sort them into 3 broad categories: If they haven't expired, Gooder puts them aside to take to food kitchens, schools, and churches. If the food isn't rotten, it gets delivered to farms for animals to eat. The rest gets composted and turned back into good dirt. Jasmine says companies pay for waste management anyway. They might as well pay to have their excess food donated. Plus, this way, they get a tax deduction. The goal is to turn food waste into a win-win-win. Better for hungry people, the climate, and businesses.
So what is specifically being brought in today?
So lots of breads, lots of breakfast items, snacks, bagels, English muffins.
Do you ever get people who are like, this is so annoying. This company is creating more hassle for us.
You know, sometimes at the top, but not at the bottom. A good example of that is when the Atlanta airport is one of Gooder's customers. What we found is when we went over to the airport and I started talking to different employees about it, these are people that themselves are living on the marginal poverty line, making $9, $10 an hour at the airport. And so many of them said, I love Gooder. I used to hate having to throw this food away when I needed it at home for my family.
Somebody's watching this and they're like, yay, Jasmine, go Gooder.
Yeah.
But what can I do?
If you're an everyday person and you're working and you're supporting your local stores, your local businesses, ask them what they're doing with their food waste. This is your opportunity to get them to do something. And that has been the catalyst for a lot of the customers that we have today.
Jasmine's got a great solution to get food that would be wasted to those who need it. But what can we do? How can each of us waste less food? At a grocery store in New York City, I roam the aisles with food waste expert Dana Gunders.
In grocery stores, oftentimes in the produce section, you see this like piles, right? I don't know, it puts us into a headspace where we want to buy more.
Yeah.
Dana says that food waste has 5 times the greenhouse gas footprint of the entire aviation industry. And we all contribute to it every day.
This is a lot of cilantro, and I feel like it always ends up at the bottom of the drawer, wilted.
I actually store them in a jar of water in my refrigerator, and I find it helps double, triple the amount of time that cilantro can last.
Small changes at home, like the way we store fresh produce, can add up to big change. Dana's got other tips too.
Shopping is really where we commit to food, and so we need to be careful not to overbuy. Old school things like shopping lists and meal planning really help. Next, as I tell my friends at the end of dinner, love your leftovers. They are the only true free lunch, and when you get sick of them, you can move on to number 3, which is freeze your food. Your freezer is like a magic pause button, and so many things can be frozen that you don't think of. Bread, milk, cheese, and that half jar of pasta sauce you didn't use. Next, use it up. Be sure to shop your fridge before you restock it. And lastly, learn your labels. Best Buy and Enjoy Buy are really just guesstimates of when food is at its best. They're not an indication that it's gone bad.
I think one of the things, certainly when it comes to climate, is people feel like, well, you know, little old me, if I do one thing, really, what difference does it make? How do you explain to people that they should pay more attention?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to not be all or nothing. You know, if you do a little bit better at managing your food and you one night a week make a choice to, use what you have instead of getting takeout, even if you're kind of tired, that literally can avoid that food from going to a landfill and emitting methane.
Okay.
And we as consumers are the largest source of food going to waste in the US. So if we don't start to work on this as individuals, we will not make a real dent in this problem. These strategies are not earth-shattering. They're things that many of our parents and grandparents did, and you can be sure that my son is learning them as well. Because as we tackle this massive climate crisis, reducing food waste really is the low-hanging fruit. But no matter how sustainably we grow that fruit, it's only a good use of resources and nutrition if we all do our part to make sure that it actually gets eaten.
Clearly, we cannot grow and eat and waste food like we've been doing. But the global food system is complex, it's intricate, and different everywhere you go. And that is why some food innovators are looking to pinpoint certain problems with approaches that may take more getting used to. Here's a peek at some of the exciting things happening in the field of food production that might help us bend the curve on our emissions from field to table. One idea, technologists are using animal meat cells to grow real beef, chicken, and duck meat in labs.
So we take these cells and put them in a cultivator that provides a safe and nurturing and warm environment for the cells to grow into chicken meat. Once we grow this meat for about 2 weeks, we are ready to harvest it and shape it into the products that we love. This can be done with beef, salmon, duck, or any species that you can imagine. It's a kinder way to make meat, but it's also kinder to the environment.
It is real animal tissue, it's real animal cells. The taste is phenomenal. It tastes just like chicken.
It could be a long time before you order a lab-grown burger in a restaurant. But meanwhile, farms are using all kinds of AI sensors and robots to monitor their crops and cut down on resources. There's also a lot of talk about regenerative farming, using older, traditional techniques that till the land less, letting the soil restore itself and capture more carbon.
I would define regenerative agriculture as farming with nature instead of farming against nature. So that would be practices like applying compost, planting cover crops, reducing tillage, managed grazing, planting perennials, basically anything that builds healthy soil.
We'll also be introduced to more types of food that may be less familiar to us now.
We will have to learn how to eat many more insects. When it comes to animals, we're normally eating about 10 species. There are about 2,000 edible insects, and we will have to learn how to incorporate that in our diets. We'll have to learn how to incorporate seaweeds in a massive way. We'll have to learn how to cultivate many crops in our cities vertically, so we can use less land, less water, less energy.
Vertical farming is no longer some fluffy, futuristic concept, but it's already here, as we speak today, to change our lives and our planet for the better. We don't use any pesticides. We can recycle most of the water that we use. We don't even need arable land. In fact, one of our farms used to be a Budweiser factory.
It will take all of these methods, from the most high-tech to the lowest cost, to revolutionize farming. As we've heard, we'll also need a global shift to more plant-based diets and much less food waste. All of this combined can put less pressure on our planet and help us make more of what is available. We can eat within the environmental limits of the Earth, but we need to get going. This is just the beginning of this new chapter for food, but I hope we whet your appetite to learn more about the people working hard to make what we eat sustainable, nutritious, and tasty. You can see the full talks from all of our speakers and many more at TED.com. I'm Manoush Zomorodi. Thank you so much for watching. Bon appetit.